All right, let's dive into this explainer. Today we're talking about Wolfgang Kohler. Now, this is a man who literally revolutionized how we understand intelligence and problem solving. Back in the early 20th century, psychology was, well, kind of stuck in a rut. And it actually took a stranded scientist on a remote island to completely flip our understanding of the brain right on its head. It really comes down to one core question. How do we actually learn? Think about it. Do we just stumble around blindly until something magically works? Or is there a sudden, brilliant flash of true understanding? Well, this exact question became the battleground where Kohler made his stand. To truly appreciate Kohler's genius, we have to look at the intellectual prison of early 20th century psychology that he was actively rebelling against. Back then, the dominant theory was associationism. That's basically the belief that all learning was just passive, mindless repetition. Addressing the American Psychological Association later in 1959, Kohler called that view incredibly bleak, senseless, and literally a frightful bore. Okay, here is our roadmap for today. First, the rise of Gestalt. Second, the Tenerife chimpanzee experiments. Third, insight learning defined. Fourth, isomorphism and pregnance. And finally, fifth, Kohler's enduring legacy. Let's jump right in. Section 1, the rise of Gestalt. Kohler's rise in the academic world was remarkably fast. Born in Estonia to German parents, he earned his PhD in psychoacoustics in 1909 under the renowned Carl Stump. Then, by 1913, he was appointed director of a primate station down in the Canary Islands. That unexpected detour eventually propelled him to publish his really dense theoretical masterwork in 1920, and then he actually succeeded his mentor Stump with a prestigious professorship at the University of Berlin in 1922. Now, the word Gestalt doesn't actually have a direct English equivalent, but it basically means a configuration or an organized whole. Kohler, along with colleagues Kurt Kafka and Max Wertheimer, firmly believed that breaking the mind down into isolated associative parts completely misses the big picture. To them, the whole of human experience is vastly more meaningful than just the sum of its basic sensory parts. It's like a giant puzzle, right? The whole picture is what really matters. Moving on to Section 2. The Tenerife chimpanzee experiments. So fate intervened pretty heavily in Kohler's story. He arrived at the Prussian Primate Research Center on Tenerife in 1914 for what was supposed to be a one-year stay. But the outbreak of World War I completely stranded him there for half a decade. And this is where the magic happened. There was this ape named Sultan. When Sultan couldn't reach a hanging banana by jumping, he didn't just keep helplessly failing. He paused, looked around, and then suddenly stacked wooden boxes to climb up and claim his prize. Whether Sultan was stacking those boxes or figuring out how to fit two short sticks together to make a longer pole to pull in food, Kohler noticed a really distinct pattern. The ape would try old strategies, fail, absolutely stop all overt behavior, and then suddenly execute a perfect new solution. This was clearly, definitively not blind chance. Which brings us to Section 3, Insight Learning Defined. Prior to Kohler, scientists like Edward Thorndike studied cats in puzzle boxes. They concluded that animals learned gradually through blind trial and error, based entirely on their external environment. But Kohler's apes? They were doing something entirely different. They were doing cognitive trial and error. Basically, they were mentally restructuring their internal environment before taking any physical action at all. This is exactly what Gestalt psychologists termed insight learning. We've all been there, right? It's that sudden, super relatable aha moment. It's when the relationships between objects suddenly make perfect sense in your mind, leading to one-trial learning. You aren't slowly learning how to solve the problem. You completely reorganize the information in your head until the solution just appears in a flash. All right, Section 4. Isomorphism and pregnance. You see, Kohler didn't just want to observe behavior. He really wanted to understand the actual physics of the mind. While he's most famous globally for his 1925 book, The Mentality of Apes, which documented his amazing work in Tenerife, his most ambitious theoretical work was actually published earlier in 1920. It was called Die physischen Gestalten, or the physical Gestalten. In that really dense book, he introduced this concept called psychophysical isomorphism. Now, because he believed the brain and the mind were identical, he argued that our conscious, phenomenal experience is a direct structural mirror of physical brain activity. He believed this was driven by transneuronal electrical currents flowing in the visual cortex.
Then there's the law of Prägnanz, which is a famous Gestalt principle of perceptual organization. But what's really fascinating, and honestly kind of funny, is that Kohler was embarrassed by the circularity of this famous law's definition. Decades later, while teaching a seminar at Swarthmore College, he would actually challenge his students to try and invent a better definition for it. He openly acknowledged the theoretical gaps in his own field.
And finally, Section 5, Kohler's enduring legacy.
Kohler's scientific output was just staggering. As we mentioned, he succeeded his mentor Stump as the Berlin Institute director. He published the definitive text on Gestalt psychology in 1929. He conducted groundbreaking memory research to establish the von Restorff effect, and later explored visual figural aftereffects with Hans Wallach to rigorously test those isomorphism theories of his.
But beyond his scientific brilliance, the historical record documents his profound moral courage. Kohler took a highly public, principled stance against the Nazi regime in Germany. He was actually one of the very few academics to do so before he eventually had to leave his home country to continue his career in the United States. So, I'll leave you with this. When you face a complex challenge today, are you going to rely on blind, gradual trial and error? Or will you pause, mentally restructure your environment, and wait for your own sudden flash of insight? Thank you for exploring the brilliant mind of Wolfgang Kohler in this explainer with me today.